I, 46 male, told my first biological offspring, 26 male, that I have 2 sons, and he's not either of them. Now my sister, 38 female, is begging me to talk to him. When I, 46 male, was 20, I got my girlfriend at a time pregnant. I was extremely scared, but I manned up and married her. It was hard, but we made it work for 8 years, until I caught her cheating. So I ended the marriage and began co-parenting my, at a time, son. He was my world. My dad wasn't there for me at all, so I swore to myself I would be the best father I could. I had my then son every weekend. I was always on time and ready to go. Even though I worked full-time and was going to school, I made sure he always had my full attention when he was with me. He was my best friend and my son. Even though money was tight, we had some amazing adventures. He loved spending time with my family and even had friends in my neighborhood. I thought we were doing well until he was around 11. At that point, he started to not want to visit me. His mother had a new boyfriend who was well off, and I knew he was taking them on trips and doing fun activities on the weekends, so at first I didn't make a stink. But about 6 months after they started dating, my son was seeing me maybe 1 weekend a month. After about 9 months, he stopped coming altogether. After 3 months of calling, chasing, and begging, I was getting nowhere. So my family came together and hired a lawyer to sue my ex for parental alienation. I lost and was ordered to pay more child support. As I was leaving the courtroom, my ex's lawyer approached me and offered to cancel the child support if I gave up my paternal rights. I flat refused until the lawyer said this was both my ex-wife's and my then son's wishes. So I asked to speak to my son alone, and they agreed as long as both lawyers were in the room. I spoke to my son and asked him if he really wanted me to give up my rights, and he said yeah. I explained that it would mean I won't be his dad and he couldn't come visit me or my family anymore. He looked me dead in the eyes, like he was asking the time, and said, yeah, so? I was shattered. I asked again if he really understood what he was saying, and he said yes, that he wanted to be his mom's boyfriend's son. I signed the papers that day, and from that day until 2 days ago, he never spoke nor contacted me or any of my family. It literally almost killed me. I started to drink and stayed drunk for weeks. Finally, one day, I drank until I passed out and aspirated my own vomit. I would be dead now, except the mailman dropped a package addressed to me to my neighbor's house, and she saw me convulsing through my window and called 911. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital with aspiration pneumonia. After that, I moved back to my hometown, got a new job, hit the gym, and spent 4 years in intense psychotherapy. I was finally able to let it all go and move on with my life. About 6 years after my move, I met my now wife, and she had an 11-year-old son. I was standoffish with him at first, but the kid was, and is, so amazing that I couldn't help but fall in love with him. The day he turned 18, he asked me to adopt him. His father left him when he was 5, never to be seen or heard of again. It was the proudest day of my life. He and his mother turned my life around and gave me a reason for living. Now, not only do I have a wonderful adopted son, 19, who is currently serving the Marines, but I also have a son, 4-year-old, and daughter, 18 female. My career has also taken off, and I'm doing very well for myself and my family. I am a comeback story basically. I went from a man no one could love to a successful father of 3 with a beautiful wife and family. I survived. Then about 3 weeks ago, I get a call at my office. It was my ex-sister-in-law who informed me that my ex had passed. I simply said okay and hung up. It's been 14 years since I've had any contact with any of those people, and I have no desire to know anything about them now. On the 4th, my family and I were getting ready to go to a picnic when there was a knock on the door. I recognized him through the front glass. It was my first biological offspring. I opened the door and he said, "Hello, Opie. I'm your son." Without an ounce of hesitation, I said, "No, you're not. I have 2 sons and you're not either one of them. Now please leave my property." He just stood there kind of dumbfounded as I shut the door. And after a moment, he left. I then put out a text to my family letting them know that he was lurking around, and I have no intention of having any contact with him, and I will cut anyone who does out of my life completely. It's been 14 years. I don't owe him or his family anything. I had to listen to my mother cry for him on her deathbed over that child. I laid in a hospital bed with a machine breathing for me, wishing it would turn off and let me die because of that child. I learned in therapy that he had a right to make his own choices, but that I also have the right to make mine. My choice was to move on without him as part of my family, as he wanted. He has no right to come back into my life and disturb me or my family now. My entire family agrees with me. Even my wife and my in-laws agree that nothing good can come out of this. He's 26 years old now. If this was some evil plot by his mother and her boyfriend, he's had 8 years to contact me and didn't. Now that his mother is dead, all of a sudden I'm up to bat? I don't care if he was 12 or 200. He made a call. And if you had seen the look in his eyes when he said, "Yeah, so?" you would have known like I did, that he didn't give a damn about me. So I had to stop giving a damn about him to survive. He doesn't have the right to ambush me on my front porch and act like he's anything to me now. Well, come to find out, my sister is the one who has been giving him and my ex-sister-in-law my contact info. My sister, who I love dearly, is inconsolable that I won't give him a chance. Apparently, he called her after he came to my house and broke down. I told her to stop right there. I don't care. But now she's begging me, for our mother's sake, to meet with this kid. So I ask you, is there anything good that can come out of a meeting with this kid now? Now for the top advice. He was 12. Just because he wanted it didn't mean you had to give him what he wanted. He couldn't possibly understand the long-term consequences of that choice. You had a choice to pay the child support and demand a custody agreement be upheld and enforced. Nope, I did not. The court had literally just told me that because my son was 12, I could not enforce or demand visitation time. Literally, I was ordered to pay more child support for a child that I had no right to see. Your sister doesn't sound very emotionally bright and has a lot of unwelcome opinions. You need to be very firm with her, that her meddling will have consequences if pursued. As someone who has had a parent leave the family, I do agree that blood is thicker than water. Literally everything is thicker than water. The old saying isn't worth the ink it was written with. The only slack I will cut my sister here is she was 12 when he was born, and for the 8 years my ex and I were together, my sis was like a second mother to him. She was also in college at the time of the lawsuit and only got the stories of what was going on. She loved that boy, and my mother did too. My mother cried on her deathbed to see him one last time. I wouldn't wish that on anyone. My only curiosity with this sis is what he's playing at. I'll be honest, after he turned 18, I had some hope in my heart that he might try to contact me, but that was short-lived. That was 8 years ago, so why now? Tell your sister if she wants to have her own relationship with a guy, that's her prerogative, as long as she leaves you out of it. But she's given her opinion on what you should do, and now she needs to drop it, unless she wants to not hear from you for a while too. If you decide to hear him out, it will be on your terms and your timeline. Pressuring you into that conversation when you're still suspicious and angry will not result in the happy ending she wants. And using your late mother to guilt trip you is not okay on any level. As for whether you should hear him out, I do think it makes a difference that he was only 11 when this all went down. His mom dying might have prompted some reflection on things he couldn't really bring himself to question or push back on when she was alive, and maybe his remorse is genuine. But it is equally plausible he's just not happy with what she left him and the will. So if you're fine leaving things where they are, I don't think anyone else gets to tell you otherwise. Yes, that an 11 to 12-year-old was swayed by his mother and stepfather that he lived with, and who were probably providing PlayStations and ski trips, is not surprising. Devastating, but not surprising. Most 12-year-olds are little turds, especially ones that have been through a divorce. So if Opie wanted to be more open-minded, and if during the last 8 years something from mom or stepdad was preventing his contact or poison his ear, he could hear him out. But Opie took the rejection so hard the first time. I can see how he just can't go there again. There was a story in AITA and finished off on Best of Reddit updates about a woman who found out her husband was cheating and assumed her ex-husband was alienating the son against her. When he tried to come back into her life, she found out not only did he know about the cheating, the son blackmailed the father and got him whatever he wanted. Years of trying to establish a relationship with her son only to find out that he really is a piece of trash. He did not apologize or anything, He admitted everything to her and told her the reason why he did that was because she didn't have anything to offer and tried to be entitled to her money because the father didn't have any more money to offer. So he was looking for some to pay for his college. I doubt it's the same scenario. Like everyone said here on the post, OP should do it on his own time and with boundaries. Some people get many chances, some only get one and they blow it. It may sound like he would be taking it out on him, but before the son states anything, OP should summarize what happened after he said, yeah, so, and what he's been through. Also, OP should inform him to be very careful with what he says next, because it might be their last conversation. That story was heartbreaking. I felt so bad for that woman. Her son was a legit sociopath. He did and said that when he was a child, but has been an adult for 8 years now, and only made contact after his mother died. Regardless of whether he had any fault in this, there was a lot of harm done to you. It's not negligible what you were put through by him and his mother. And with him growing up with her as a role model, I'd be suspicious too. He's old enough to know that there are some things that can't be undone, and a whole lot of damage that, I'm sorry, doesn't cure. Not that he said he was sorry. I don't think you're obligated to risk that damage again, especially now that you have the well-being of your wife and 3 children to consider, as well as your own. The Chinese have a saying that there is no medicine that cures regret. This situation seems to be in that category. Exactly. Why risk the regret of letting this grown man into his life after all that he put him through? Best to do what OP has done and to stand firm. Last story. Am I the a-hole for not letting my father un-disown me? To preface this, I'll give the baseline of my relationship with my father. He constantly reminded me of the fact that I was an accident during a pre-divorce hate-filled tryst. He literally sold me off to my abusive mother when they divorced to try and get a lower alimony payment. He abandoned me despite having partial custody, was never around even after I moved in with him when I was 13, and moved out before I even graduated when I was 17, and left me in the care of my hard drug-addicted stepbrother. With that out of the way, I'll explain the current issue. After living with him, and him subsequently abandoning me again, I moved in with my sister and brother-in-law. They had a kid along with my brother-in-law's son from a previous marriage, and everything was fine for a few years, until my sister decided she wanted to get pregnant, after agreeing with my brother-in-law to never have kids again. She went to the point of poking holes in condoms and going off her birth control to try and force him into another pregnancy, which she was dead set against due to previous trauma and failed pregnancies. Coupling that with other serious issues and boundaries she didn't respect, the relationship failed and they split up. At this time, my relationship with my father wasn't good, but it existed. That is, until I found out my sister was lying about my brother-in-law abusing her and their son and filing for him to have 0 custody. I had lived with them almost the entire time their kid was around. I was as involved in their relationship as they were, and I knew this was a lie. After some questioning, I found out my father was a supporter in all of this and was fighting for my brother-in-law to never see his son again. I snapped after sitting in on their mediation call, and I heard my brother-in-law cry like I'd never heard him before. It was the type of agony you'd only hear from a good man about to lose his child when he had done nothing wrong. I went on a warpath to fight for him, and in doing so, called my father and ripped him 6 ways from Sunday. When I called him, I told him flat out, "Make sure you choose your words carefully, because this may be the last time you and I ever speak." He proceeded to make a long list of excuses, dodging every question before I could even finish asking. And on top of all this, trying to tell me, "You should leave this between your sister and brother-in-law. It's their fight. You have no idea what their son is going through." As angry and appalled as I was, he suddenly tells me he has to work and hangs up. It's been 3 years, and that was the last time he and I have spoken. The next day, he comes by with something for my nephew and mentions to my brother-in-law that he's disowned me. No skin off my nose. He was a crappy failure of a father, and I'll be fine without him. Almost immediately, he changes his mind. He's always been a coward with no spine. He starts texting and calling me to try and guilt me into forgiving him, but I don't bite. I don't respond at all. He's a highly religious man, so he's not worried about me. He's worried about what God will think of this. And no matter what he says, I refuse to give in. 3 years later, I live a totally different life far removed from any of them. I'm happy now and have people who genuinely love me and care about me. Sometimes I can't help but think about it though. Did I do the right thing? What happened with your brother-in-law in custody? I was as involved with the custody case as I could be. I spoke out about how my brother-in-law was a good father being framed in a bad light and that he deserves to see his son. He won partial custody, which in my opinion is much less than he should have gotten, but was still much better than the alternative. Thanks for laying it out. I'm glad it worked out. And once the kids get older, their wishes regarding custody will count more, and your sister's kids will probably want to spend more time with Dad. Wow, your father sounds like a serious piece of work. The fact that he was a crappy father when you were a child, you know, the time when parents are actually supposed to parent, would have been enough for you to justify never speaking to him again. Everything else is just icing on the cake. I have a similar situation with my mother. I haven't spoken to her for 5 years and my life is much better for it. You're not a-hole. You owe your father absolutely nothing. Not a-hole. You did yourself a huge favor by dropping him from your life. My maternal grandfather and grandmother have done far less awful things to my mother, but abusive nonetheless, and her remaining in contact with them and failing to set boundaries out of guilt and a fear of regret has brought her so much pain. There are times when she is depressed for days after having a phone call with them. I have tried explaining time and time again, you do not owe anyone a relationship at the expense of your own mental health and happiness. Take care of yourself.